Today, Nintendo reveals the Switch OLED edition. Is it the worst thing to ever happen? This is CheckPoint. Welcome to CheckPoint, the only gaming news show that exists in all dimensions and timelines.
Even the one where all animals are bipedal and video games don't exist?
Yes, in that dimension, CheckPoint is not funny.
Oh, well, I'm sure you could find plenty of people in this dimension who say we're not funny.
Some years ago, Ubisoft, developer of the Assassin's Creed series and protector of accused abusers in the highest levels of its executive staff, were making too many Assassin's Creed games and announced that they'd be pumping the brakes on churning out the annual releases to focus on less regular but ideally better games. The critical reception of the AC games that followed, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, have borne that out, showing that when their developers focus on a fewer number of bigger games, the results are more enjoyable for everyone, except maybe some of their staff for those other reasons I mentioned earlier. Taking that to a logical extreme, the game dev part, not the other thing, what if Ubisoft focused all their AC resources across their many studios on only one incredibly large Assassin's Creed game, codenamed Assassin's Creed Infinity, and yes, it's a live service? In a blog post, Ubisoft said, quote, "Rather than pass the baton from game to game, this will allow the AC franchise to evolve in a more integrated and collaborative manner that's less centered on studios and more focused on talent and leadership." Without also saying, plus this way we can totally ruin the good decision we made by ceasing yearly releases and instead start pursuing the latest craze in game design that conveniently also lets us pump it full of microtransactions. If you thought 100 hours was a long time to beat Assassin's Creed Valhalla, look forward to the next Assassin's Creed game that you'll be able to complete never.
Big news, everyone! Nintendo has released a new Nintendo Switch. Why are you crying? The new Switch offers a larger 7-inch screen compared to the previous model's 6.2 inches. No, seriously, why are you crying? And the screen is OLED. Just like in the rumors that were published and continue to be published as actual fact. Now, really, I'm going to have to insist that you stop crying. Look, I understand why you're upset. You read a rumor on a website somewhere, could be anywhere and really everywhere, where the source said that the next Switch would have a 7-inch OLED screen, and that was it. And then the internet spun that into a wish fulfillment fantasy, making the next Switch refresh into some cross between God and a 4K oral sex machine. You're really just upset with yourself. Unless you're me, in which case you're upset that more people haven't picked up on Nintendo's MO this entire time, which is, whenever Nintendo releases new hardware, it could mean anything. Here, let me do what I do best, construct a straw man and then win the argument. The reasoning goes that a larger, better quality screen in the Switch must mean it's a next generation console. Which makes sense. I mean, when have they ever done that before? I think this is exciting news for Nintendo, despite the fact that I absolutely am not going to purchase an OLED Switch, because it's not for me. I own a launch day Switch, it works perfectly well, and I bet Nintendo will be fine without my dollars in their pocket. This is for someone who couldn't find a Switch during lockdown, or someone whose old Switch has been on too many trips and starting to get a little beat up, or someone who really loves tabletop mode and wants to bend things to unusual angles. Pervert. And other news outlets are backing me up on this. CNET wrote an article titled, "Nintendo's OLED Switch isn't for you, and that's fine." It's okay for a gaming company to release gaming hardware, and for you to not buy every last one. An example. Graham, how are you enjoying your Xbox Series X?
I don't own a Series X.
See, he loves it, and yet I don't even want one, and we get along given the circumstances.
Hey, fuck off.
And we can all get along too. You just have to stop caring about this shit. It doesn't matter. Nintendo will eventually release a console that runs in 4K, despite the fact that you don't even own a 4K TV yet. The world will keep spinning, the town will keep turning, and people will keep playing the Switch on awkwardly placed benches in their front entrance.
Chinese gaming and media ultra corporation Tencent has introduced this fun-sounding new feature in over 60, by their count, of their mobile games in China. I say fun-sounding because it's called Midnight Patrol, and that sounds way cooler than the stuff my phone has, like True Tone and Focus. But what it actually does is scans your face to make sure you're not a minor playing video games after curfew. You see, near the end of 2019, China imposed both a gaming curfew and time limits for minors aimed at curbing gaming addiction. 90 minutes each weekday, 3 hours on weekends, and never between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. Tencent, who apparently tested a facial recognition system with their Honor of Kings title, is doing their part to prevent the youth from frittering away their sleep hours, but almost definitely because gaming publishers could face penalties like having their business license revoked if they don't enforce the government's curfew. They're also obliged to include real name registration and in-game spending caps, so Tencent is definitely not doing this for their own benefit. That said, according to Ars Technica, we still don't know exactly how Tencent's facial system works, whether it uses machine learning to estimate the user's age, or more likely interfaces with an existing facial database, like maybe Tencent's own, or even the government's. Things are obviously different now from when I was a minor, but I like to think I turned out all right, and I did a lot of gaming between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., or as I assume that time is now known in China, the masturbation hours.
And now, SexPoint, our new recurring segment where I talk about sex in video games in an effort to drive up our YouTube subs. And DOMs. We've already talked about Switches, so let's get moving. First up, League of Legends made a new skin for scary, flaming Nightmare Man Thresh. Rather than the brooding, bee-horned hook wielder of his previous skin, Unbound Thresh is now the bee-horny dick wielder with glowing green abs, certain to top your jungle. If video games can give you such a fresh six-pack, maybe I'll stick with Wii Fit for another few weeks. Next, Mass Effect Legendary Edition took a more non-butt-focused view of their storyline, moving the cinematic camera to positions other than directly on Miranda's ass. However, modder Scottina123 is helping them see the error of their ways by releasing a mod to put those copious, gratuitous, gluteus cameras scenes back in. In an excellent twist, this is the same Scottina123 who initially released a mod for the original Mass Effect 2 that took out all the fan service because sometimes you just gotta have a conversation about saving Miranda's family from a gruesome fate without focusing on how lovingly a BioWare employee rendered her drawer slammer. Finally, Among Us has been localized into Irish, the sexiest accent. More specifically, it's localized into Gaeilge, the language of Ireland. That's maybe less sexy than I thought, since it's all about the preservation of a minority language that was stamped out by colonizers. But hey, someone probably wants to bang the sussy vent people, right? SexPoint!
Is this why you were texting me asking for similes for Miranda's ass all last night?
I've never played Mass Effect, and I have a duty to our viewers.
To give them properly researched ass metaphors?
All the online lists were non-exhaustive and mostly just copied from each other.
SexPoint will not be recurring.
Coming up, Hasbro has announced an Animal Crossing version of Monopoly, the most licensed and reskinned board game of all time. Unlike typical Monopoly games, there's no money, and players can use skill cards to help them earn Nook Miles to win, because if there's a Monopoly in town, you bet your ass Tom Nook is going to be a part of it.
You had a slight stumble in that story, but I think it was fine.
Yeah, because it sounded like I said mooning instead of moving.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, it is a story about ass. I think we can maybe leave that in as just a gag.
Yeah.
And no one will notice because Heather won't put this part in the end.
Haha. Because gaming publishers could pace penalties. That was a weird one. Animal Crossing Monopoly. But there's no money.
And it's, yeah. And there's skill cards?
Yeah, and you don't pay rent. You go around collecting fossils and bugs and fish.
Right.
It's of all the licenses that have like what seems like an easy port to Monopoly, land ownership. It's weird to me that it's like no. It's all about collecting bugs and stuff when it's like literally Tom Nook is a landlord.
And he's like, and his kids run his shop, and it's like, yeah, there's could be things to buy, lots of things to buy.
Yeah.
You know, like I need to buy 4 of the same TV to put in my house, but then because they never come in different colorways for some reason, unless you go to somebody else's island. This is frustrating to me, though.
Okay.
Is that I think this was a different game.
Oh?
Yeah, I think this was initially somebody devised this idea to make an Animal Crossing game. Where it's like, why don't we just do an Animal Crossing game? And they came up with the idea. It's like, you'll go around a board and you'll do whatever. And then somebody's like, well, isn't that Monopoly? And then they're like, oh, shit. I guess we have to do that. Like, I could see someone saying, let's make an Animal Crossing game, going to the board game division at Hasbro and saying, let's work on that. And then someone was like, wait, it's just Monopoly. And they're like, okay, well, let's just reskin Monopoly then. That's what I want to think, is someone made an effort.
I want it to be actually reskinned, though. I assume this is part of like the branding guidelines that Hasbro put in place. But go and jail and go to jail and free parking are all exactly the same. So like go to jail is like a
1930s
a human cop with a cap and a whistle, and free parking is the rear end of a Studebaker.
Yeah,
like it's just super weird. Also, there's no jail on the island. There should be.
I mean, you can get jail cell things, right? You get bars and stuff like that. But
put what's his name? Barreled.
I was just thinking Barreled. Yo, fuck Barreled.
Yeah, put that strange bear behind bars. But yeah, what you said this earlier. What is it? The Monopoly of Theseus?
Yeah.
How many things do you change
until it stops being Monopoly? And there are those 4 corners that are like, those never change in any Monopoly game ever, right? They're always the same because it's part of the branding. And I'm just like, but how do you trade stuff out? And then when do you know when it stops being Monopoly? Because then every game is just Candyland. Like it's just walk around the board and do whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like who gives a shit? It's weird that this thing exists, but I mean, I will say at least it's not the fact that it isn't just a straight reskin, that at least there's some reason to play it.
Can this version of Monopoly still make you angry at your family? Because then it's truly captured the Monopoly experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to ignore the printed rules, only play with the house rules.
Right. And then halfway through the game, when you're 6 hours in and your dad's like just kind of like getting real tired and he's looking at the rules finally and he's like, do you know we could be putting stuff for auction? And you're like, what?
Remember when we did that once? We did a stream with like Monopoly with the real rules.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad.
No, it was an okay game at that point. Not the best, but still an okay game.
Yeah, it was all right.
More playable than we thought.
I think there's enough of them though. Too many Monopolies. Cool it. Here's my hot take.
Yeah.